All right. So, okay, welcome everybody. We've already had a lively discussion here at our second OCL Quarterly Community Showcase. We are going through OCL's updates and developments and things like that we've been going through in Q2 of 2023. We've got some exciting developments and also some exciting plans that we're going to be talking about, and definitely welcome questions and things in the chat. And please feel free to raise your hand if you have questions too. Just to give you a quick outline of what we're going to go through today, we've got a feature showcase for some things that have been developed in the past few weeks. We've got some highlights from the community.
I'm on the OCL call now. I just jumped onto that, so I'll take some notes. I can post them back on the channel in case there's.
And then we've also got some looking ahead to 2023 Q3. So some features that we've got in progress, and also talking about OCL version 3 and some smart dictionaries. So just to kick it off real quick, I wanted to just give a very brief summary of some of the tickets that we've completed. We've got a few categories in here of what we've been working on. And of course, these are more development facing tickets. There are, of course, lots of work that we're doing in our services and working with our community, making some learning materials, doing hands-on support with people. So not everything we do is captured here, but I wanted to show at least some of the tickets and points that we've been doing and where we've been putting our time. In particular, we spend a decent amount of our time making sure that we're maintaining the tools and making sure there's as few bugs as possible. We also have been doing a lot of work on performance and infrastructure to make sure that our services are up and running well. And we also are often working in our term browser application, the user interface, so that we can make sure there's good features in there and that it's actually doing what people need it to do. In the meantime, of course, we can't do anything. We need our terminology service, our API, running well to make sure that it supports the features that people need. And one piece of this is the OCL Fire Core, and making sure that our terminology content can be extracted in a Fire compatible format, and trying to make sure we're as client compliant and useful as possible. And of course, we've got other things going on too, making sure that we're documenting well and making sure that the CL content is released and ready to go for people. So without further ado, I want to go through a quick feature showcase. So I'm going to demonstrate a couple of newly released features in OCL's term browser. And after that, I'll hand it off to Sunny real quick to give a peek into some of OCL's latest and upcoming API and infrastructure updates. So one moment, I'm going to switch over to the OCL term browser. So one thing that we are doing in particular is we're trying to make it easier for people to add and edit content in OCL's term browser. So I'm going to go into the source and show a couple of things that we've added in here. One in particular is that when you are adding concepts, previously people were kind of left on their own to figure out what kind of concept class, what kind of data type and things like that they're going to have to use. We've actually now added in suggested concept classes based on what you've already done in your source. So just as an example, and you can kind of see it here in the background, I've already made some questions and some medical supply and some convenience set concepts. So we are suggesting based on your past history what you might want to use. So it's quicker clicks, not having to search each time. Instead of searching convenience set, it's already suggested right here for you. This is the same thing with data type, whatever you've used before, and particularly with locales based on what your primary locale and other locales that you've added into the source. They will come up here in the suggested list, and it's very handy for wanting to make sure that you can pick what you want to right away. Another thing that we've done in here is that if you've used a custom attribute before, for OpenMRS, for example, the isSet attribute, I personally sometimes would forget, am I supposed to do isSet like this, or is it supposed to be with an underscore? We've got these suggested pieces in here just in case you don't want to have to type them in every time and remember them. So we've got those. And then one other thing that we've added in here are suggested map types. So if you are using the quick add mapping feature and you are wanting to add a new mapping, there are suggested map types for whatever you use most recently. So for example, if I wanted to add answers to this question concept, I'm able to do that with that suggested map type. And then we, of course, from previous times have our suggested sources. So maybe I want to add CL answers in here and do that very quickly. So, okay, that is what we've been doing for this. One other thing I wanted to remind about, this is still in beta, so it's a newer feature, but people might have seen our summary tab where you want to go in and get an idea of what is in your source. You can see how many of your concepts and mappings are active. You can see what kind of concept classes you have in your source, etc. If you want to get a quick glance at what is in here, then this is a place to do that. We actually, a newer development in here, we made this available for OCL collections also. So let me jump over to my collections real quick. So we have for a collection where we've collected contents from other sources, not just our own, we've also implemented this summary tab. So you can see that same information as if this were a source. You're able to see how much of your content is active, what kind of mappings you have in here, what kind of languages you've brought together in here. And yeah, so it's very handy when you're wanting to get a quick look at, what is in this source. So one other thing that I just wanted to show, this is for API users in particular. Some of you may or may not have seen our Swagger before, but it is a good place to see what API calls are available for OCL's API. And one thing in particular we have changed, I personally ran into the issue where I wasn't sure which importer to use when I was importing content into OCL. We've actually retired a few of our importer lines and streamlined it all to using our importers bulk import endpoints. So it makes it much easier, much simpler to figure out like, all right, if I want to import my CSV or my big set of OCL concepts, where should I be doing that at? So now we have it in here where you can post your own big bulk import and you can check in on its status. So with that, I'm going to toss it over to Sunny. Sunny, could you give us a peek into some of OCL's latest stuff?
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Hi, guys. So I'm going to talk about some of the upcoming features, which are just dev done or almost dev done, that they're available for testing on one of our environments. So some of them are like converting an OCL export into an OCL importable format. So we recently wrote sort of a class which you can utilize, like a package which you can utilize to convert an OCL export and import. And very, very soon it will be embedded into our bulk importer. So from the term browser, you can, just like the way you import your OCL content, now you will be able to add an OCL exported content directly and import into another OCL instance. The other one is around, we upgraded to Google Analytics latest one. This is something that we very recently deployed in all the environment. I think in the next showcase, we'll be adding more info on that. One major one that I want to show is the improvement on search. Let me just quickly share my screen. All right, I hope you guys can see my screen.
Yep.
Right. So we collected a lot of feedback on search, and most of it is added here. So we tried to simplify our search by taking more control inside OCL core APIs on how do we score the results, how do we perform different queries. So we took away the exact match button here, and we ordered or ranked our results based on term matching, prefix matching, word matching, wildcard matching, and then fuzzy matching. So and also we started highlighting why it matched. So for example, when I search for SPO2, this is like a global search. I get the more relevant results, which are exact matches, and then there are word matches. And and you can see those are highlighted here. Also, you can see some of the searches where some of the results where it doesn't match the display name or the preferred name, but it matched the synonym. So we try to highlight that SPO2 is a synonym here, which you can see here as well. Similarly, this is another example of search where we also match with the map codes now. So this concept doesn't have 5902 in it, but it is mapped to a concept which has 5902. So we started highlighting that as well. Without opening the result, you can see this question mark here for these kind of complicated matches where you can see why it matched, and it will tell you the details, what were the different reasons why it matched with the query that you sent. So there are more improvements coming up in search. This is going to be deployed pretty soon to our testing environments this week, and then hopefully soon to different environments. So this was one big update that we were working on. The other ones are, there are some improvements on exporting content, exporting versions from OCL, and also when you're running a longer task like deleting a source or deleting an org, or adding too many references in a collection in one go. So we try to shift those big running tasks automatically to asynchronous processing, so that you get a task ID back, and which you can query on the completion of that task. So that is it from me. I'll hand it over to Rafal for infrastructure updates.
Yeah, thanks, Sunny. Hi, everyone. Let me just quickly share my screen. All right. So as far as infrastructure is concerned, we did a number of things, mostly around improving stability and performance of our OCL online service. The first thing we did was migrating a single sign-on to a dedicated cluster for better isolation, performance, and stability. And also we migrated our discussion forum chat.openconceptlab.org to self-hosted instance and integrated it with SSO. What does it mean is that if you go to chat.openconceptlab.org and try to log in, you will be redirected to a single OCL online service, sign-in service, and you can use the same credential to log into both our application as well as the chat. So the credentials are shared. As you can see here, there's more and more content in our forum, and we discuss here the things. So we invite you all to have a peek and maybe join the discussions. There is also a search has gone wrong discussion forum, which is related to the work that Sunny described about improving the searches. So if you discover that your search doesn't return what you expected, you can contribute to this discussion and reply with an example of that search, and we can look into that and try to fix. Going back to infrastructure, we deployed Elasticsearch cluster with 3 nodes for improved performance and high availability on staging and production environments. What it means is that we'll be able to roll out updates of Elasticsearch index that is responsible for the searches without any downtime, and also it is bulletproof for any hardware failures that we encounter to one of nodes, so that we don't lose any data. We have improved memory management for OCR services by enabling swap, basically providing more memory for export and import tasks. And we also set hard memory thresholds for our services so that one service misbehaving doesn't influence other services that we run. We also upgraded Terraform. Terraform is something that is used to provision the whole OCL online in an automatic fashion. And we upgraded that to the latest version, which allowed us to set up rolling upgrades for EC2s that we use on AWS infrastructure. It again allows us to roll out upgrades with no downtime. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. I'm working on doing the setup for Redis in a cluster way, and that should be done this week. And there is also another thread on talk when I summarize the performance and stability work for the upcoming weeks, and you can follow any updates on this thread regarding the infrastructure improvements as well. Thanks.
All right. Thank you both so much. Great to hear these updates that are going on. These are certainly very technical updates, and they are not small bits of work, and they keep the OCL service running and running smoothly. There was one other thing that I absolutely forgot to share, but I thought it would be helpful for this audience. In the term browser for your sources, we a few months ago released a feature where you could auto assign IDs. Essentially, when you are creating concepts or mappings, OCL will just give it an ID based on whatever scheme you choose. So whether that is sequential, maybe you're starting from ID 1, it'll count up new IDs each time you create a new concept. Same with concept IDs, you could make it so that a UUID will be assigned every time that you create a new concept. The new piece of this is that you can now change your auto assignment scheme. Keep in mind that it is not recommended to be switching back and forth between schemes a lot. It's good to set one and keep it that way. However, you now actually can change. It's very easy to not realize what scheme you need when you're first setting it up. But now we've enabled it so you can change back and forth between schemes. But as I said, please be very cautious about it. So, okay, I believe that is it for our features. I did want to get into some other content and releases that we've been going on. Of course, CL's latest release from April 2023 is out, and I believe there is another one coming up relatively soon. This previous release included a number of Spanish concepts where same as SNOMED content was available. We've got new concepts for partners in health, for MSF, Medicine Sans Frontières, and Cambodia. We've got medication concepts, particularly for Kenya's National Health Data Dictionary and Kenya EMR and others. All these releases can be found at the CL source in Open Concept Lab. And there's also release notes on OpenMRS Talk. And I want to give some community highlights now. We've certainly alluded to this before. I want to make sure that everybody is aware and welcome to join. OCL Chat is available. We officially launched this at OpenHIE conference, and this is available for everybody to get started participating in. I actually linked the chat thread that Rafal was referring to, where OCL searches have gone wrong. We absolutely invite everybody to come on in, give where your searches went wrong, give where your thoughts are. Please make posts asking questions. We want this to be a place for the community to live and to thrive. So keep this in mind. We've got chat.openconceptlab.org. We have also launched our Smart Dictionary initiative. And just to give a reminder what Smart Dictionaries are, it's about guided workflows that help users to quickly complete their common terminology tasks, such as creating mappings and making dynamic references. This is also intended to have seamless integration of FHIR into OCL and the term browser. And we want to just generally nudge users towards best practices for terminology management, such as the reuse of curated content. We've got a blog post about this. Feel free to check out our blog on openconceptlab.org. And this initiative is undergoing planning right now. We are wanting to make sure that we are tackling things in a logical and smooth way. And you can expect some of these to be seen in OCL version 3, which we are going to talk about a little bit later. I wanted to give a shout out to one of our community members, Suruchi, who created a demo video for us that we posted on our YouTube. Suruchi shows us how to replace CL's answers with a custom answer using an OCL collection. And you can see here that she essentially in her collection replaced CL's other concept with her own specific concept. So go ahead and watch her video and see our tips and tricks playlist on YouTube for more. And speaking of OpenMRS, we've got a squad update, just that OpenMRS lately has been driving lots of new features for OCL, such as some of the ones that I demonstrated today in the term browser. We, again, are working with Partners in Health, MSF, to get them transitioned to using OCL for their concept management. And we're just generally discussing concept management workflows. We're resolving bugs in OCL, et cetera. If you are an OpenMRS user who also uses OCL, we have weekly calls, and we love when new people come in and ask their questions or participate in the discussion. Please let us know, and we're happy to get you the details to join us. Another update is that the OCL team was at the OpenHIE conference in Lilongwe, Malawi. We had a couple of big presences throughout there. I actually forgot to put this, but we did a technical showcase of our product with the entire conference where people were able to come in and out and get a real-time technical demonstration with whatever they wanted to do or ask questions to us. We also led a discussion on national health data dictionaries, which I've got more details and from our OpenHIE terminology services call in June. We've got notes and a recording, and we've got upcoming frameworks and materials that are coming up with that. This session had more than 50 participants representing over 10 countries, and it ended up being a really great, I almost want to say a therapy session, where everybody was sharing their challenges and connecting with each other over the difficulties that come with setting up national terminology standards. This discussion is going to keep going, so we invite people who would like to continue participating in this. We also had our very first OCL team workshop where we got as many of our team members together as we could. For a lot of us, this is the first time we ever met in person, despite working together for many years. We had some key topics in there, such as our upcoming priorities, whether they are technical, community, OCL services, how we're helping implementers, and things like that. Where we talked about providing guidance for implementers on whether we should be hosting in a local server versus cloud hosting, meaning OCL Online. And we also talked about how to improve our website and make it a more enjoyable experience for new users who want to get started with OCL or people who want to explore what OCL has to offer. Another conference that we went to was the Global Goods Innovator Conference. We had John and Sunny there representing Open Concept Lab. And very cool thing that we were noticing, these non-grayed out global goods are all global goods that are using or exploring OCL for their terminology needs. So we already talked about OpenMRS, but actually there is a number of global goods in here who are wanting to use OCL as their concept management, their metadata registry, whatever it might be, so that ongoing management of content can be well managed and also shared across these global goods. I actually wanted to give a cool example of one that I've seen in the community, which is using OpenFN and OCL to support data exchange between OpenMRS and DHIS2. We don't need to get super into this workflow, but I think it's helpful to show that what OpenFN is doing here. They've published their mappings in OCL, and then OpenFN uses those mappings to translate data in real time so that translated content can get loaded into DHIS2. So it's actually bringing together a number of global goods and automating the workflow from OpenMRS content to DHIS2. And so now I wanted to start looking ahead into Q3 and maybe a little bit beyond, but I think it's also good to talk about what is coming up with Q3. Paul Adams, I see you on the call. Are you able to give us a quick preview into the design system work that you've been working on?
Hi, Joe. Yeah, absolutely. I will share my screen. Hi, everyone. It's great to see so many people on this community call. I prepared this slide deck for a presentation to our kind of core internal team a few weeks ago. And so happy to share a little bit of this with you today. There's quite a lot of content in here, so I'm going to zip through some of the slides a little bit faster. But this is to give an idea about what design has been doing in the OCL team over the last few months, and also a view to what is coming up in terms of changes towards the back end of this year. We've been pretty busy in thinking about reimagining the information architecture of the term browser, which is our kind of user interface. And there's a great deal of work been going on around thinking about that, and then building a new design system on top of that architecture. Also thinking about like our design processes and how we can ingrain some of those across the team, and even wider into the community around kind of co-creation of new features, and using the kind of power of the community to prioritize our efforts in terms of usability and meeting the needs of you, our users. So I think before we get started on the changes to the term browser itself, we did go through this kind of rebranding exercise where we ran a workshop to try and figure out how we're going to represent ourselves kind of visually over, you know, the next few years. This is important as the foundation of the design system in terms of, you know, the color and typography, but it can go further than that as well. And so we thought this would be a good time to pause and just think about this kind of visual presentation. You can see a little bit of that coming through here in the color and the logo in this slide deck, and you'll see lots more of that coming up over the next few months. Here's one version of our new logo and some business cards and our icon. So that's enough about branding. As I mentioned, we've been thinking about the kind of fundamentals of the term browser user experience, and we started a project to think about how to represent your needs as terminologists and content managers in our browser, and taking a step back, not just to think about workflows, but to think about the actual things that you're working with. And so we applied a methodology called object-oriented UX. And for the techies on the call, this might sound a little bit familiar. It's heavily borrowed from a development approach, but it's applied to thinking about how to construct what you see on screen as opposed to what is powering the services behind it. And essentially what we do here is we feed a lot of artifacts and research and interview transcripts through this Orca process. And this helps us to understand the actual things that you're working with. And so we're not thinking, as I say, workflows, but we're looking for the nouns, the important parts of your work. And then we start to do the work around figuring out how to represent that on screen in a way that makes sense and is efficient in the way that you want to work. And also to give us a kind of solid foundation to build new features as we look ahead, you know, in the roadmap and some of the needs of our community over the next few years. So it's about creating that solid base to work from. And this is the first time that we've kind of thought about this from a design, purely from a design perspective to begin with, as opposed to kind of just working on features and figuring out how those join together a little bit later. This is some of the work that Joe and I did, and a big shout out to Joe at this point for all the work that he did with me on figuring out what the different objects in the system need to be and how they organize and how they relate to each other. And this image on the end shows how what you can do to those objects. So the kind of actions, the call to actions and the buttons that you'll see on screen. We then settled on a set of core objects, and I'm not going to go into tons of detail here, but these slides begin to break down the actual detail around the metadata and the content and the call to actions as well, as I mentioned. That kind of takes me into the first preview of the UI. So this is the dashboard kind of home screen of the Term Browser application. So this will be a user-centric screen where we'll be able to show things that content that is of interest to you. Maybe it's something that you are working on, or maybe it's content that you recently saw or that's recently been updated by the publisher. We've also rethought the navigation, which was one of the key aims of the information architecture work that we did. And you can see that represented down the left-hand side here. So we have this list of My Repositories. My Repositories are lists of essentially sources and collections that we've brought into one unified kind of user experience, so that there's no distinction between the type of repos when you're looking at the content on the screen. And so we're able to bring those into this idea of a repository, but with all the power that comes with collections and sources today. There'll be more on this as we start to roll out any changes. We've also brought in this idea of change requests. So this can be either an end user or a content manager contacting a publisher with suggestions for changes. It can also be where content managers have added their own content to a cloned concept, for example, and that we can notify the original owner if they would like to review the content and possibly include it in the original source material as well. There's more work to do around that, but it'll show some UI in a moment. And we've also added this idea of bookmarks. So this is where you can quickly navigate to the content that's most relevant to you. And we can also bring the bookmarks into the search functionality. So you're able to search a more narrow set of artifacts if you wish to when you're kind of working on and building out the content repos of your own. We also have some notifications up at the top here and an action button to create new repositories or organizations. Here's a list of the repositories. You can see that we've more clearly called out the original owner of the repository, and we're introducing tagging and other ways of organizing your content on the screen so that it's easier to work with in your own kind of digital workspace. There's also this idea of giving clear options around creating new repositories or creating new content, and we're bringing in ways to set some rules around the type of repo so that we can adapt the user experience and some of the configuration of those repos depending on the type of output. So if you want to create an OpenMRS dictionary that brings together a certain set of repositories with a configuration that's appropriate to OpenMRS, in case you wanted to create a Firecode system, then there will be a level of configuration which will be appropriate to that kind of resource as well. Here's this look at the forms. And here is an example of a repository. So you can see that we have sort of slightly reordered header components. You can still switch between different versions, and the owner has the opportunity to manage that repository from this menu here. So there's a simpler UI interface for managing content. This is another example of where we use these kind of gates to guide a user towards what they would like to do. So in terms of adding a concept, then they're able to select whether you would like to reuse content that exists in the community already, or whether you want to create something in bulk, create something custom, or add a bulk set of content. And there's a UI for adding references to content into your repositories. I mentioned before that we have this idea of repository types. This is a visual of the Fire type. So you can see that the UI changes slightly. The tabs are different here due to the nature of the content. It also changes the options that you have available in terms of managing that repository as well. Here is a view of where we are going with change requests. So these would be change requests that I receive either as the owner of some content or as a designated kind of reviewer of content where I've been designated by the owner or by the publisher to take a look at certain requests. And here's some detail around the request that's been received. some updates to our individual user profile pages, and an updated version of our user menu. So this is a way of navigating to settings, switching between different servers, utilizing all the help and documentation resource, or talking with other people in the community on OCL chat. Yeah, I think that covers off like at a high level some of the work that's been going on. There's going to be lots more to come, and yeah, I hope that we can kind of engage with everyone on this call around the changes that are upcoming and capture feedback as and when we're sort of rolling out features. Thanks.
Thanks, Paul. That was really great. I look forward to engaging with everybody more about this in the future, because that is certainly a huge part of the next release of OCL, is making sure that people are able to navigate it properly and able to find what they're looking for and help guide people through it. So we will be working much more on that over the coming quarter and on in coming months and years even. Last thing before we open up for discussion, just some additional planned improvements for OCL. I have checksums in here just to tell everybody this is a technical feature that would help to do the comparison between repository versions, for example. So if you want to see what actually get an automated changelog of what happened between OCL or CL's last version and the current version, checksums will be able to help with that. We also made sure search improvements. We've already talked about that today. We invite people to join us in OCL Search Has Gone Wrong. When you search something and you get wonky results and don't know why, tell us about it, and we will do our best to get it fixed and make sure that search is working as expected. Also, we're working on some bulk import improvements to make sure that when you are trying to import a JSON or a CSV file and get your content into OCL quickly, we will try to make sure that that's working better for people. If anybody would like to join us, we're talking about that tomorrow in this time slot. So please feel free to reach out or join in with us. And in general, go to chat.openconceptlab.org to contribute, make your voice heard. So with that, I am going to say thanks for joining us. We open it up for thoughts and questions. I just see Andy sent me a PM message just saying to remind us about an HL7 collaboration that is coming up. Something that I wanted to inform the community about is that we are working more closely with the HL7 community, and we've been trying to pursue more formal partnership with it and essentially making sure that OCL is supporting FHIR in the best way possible. More details to come with that in the future, but I did want to make sure that people were aware that we are getting that collaboration and that partnership more formalized in the near future. So, okay, with that, I'd like to open it up for discussion, and I do see some chats coming in. I'll be sure to address them as we can. Do people have anything they want to share or they want to talk about? We want to highlight your successes where we can. Beatrice, I might ask you in particular. I think that you did a really great job of saying some things that OCL has been doing over in Brazil. And I wonder if maybe you could just share in a minute or two the work that's been done, just so that the community can hear about the cool things you're doing.
Oh, thank you so much. Yes, we are using OCL as the national terminology server. It will now be uploaded at the Ministry of Health. We are developing the international patient summary for the Ministry of Health in Brazil. When I say we, it's the hospital I work with. Our architect, our interoperability architect here is Italo, and I will ask him to say a few words about OCL, because he's the one working with OCL and all the FHIR stuff. We have to map all our local terminologies, and we have a lot of them, for the IPS sections like immunization, allergy, medications, and so forth. And we've been very, very happy using OCL. So Italo, maybe you can say a few words about OCL and the FHIR stuff that we've been working with. Thank you.
Sure. First, I have to excuse my dog for laying like that. But moving on. Yeah, we're loading up a bunch of code systems and value sets using OCL, and basically, like Professor Beatrice said, we have to map all the resources, profiles used by IPS in an instance of an implementation guide for what we're calling IPS Brazil. And in Brazil, we have this national network called RNDS, and our challenge is to get all the data from the events, from the encounters that happen in Brazil, and we have to interchange data with another instance of a FHIR repository that is going to maintain the summary, right? The international summaries. Like it's going to be an international repository for summaries. But our challenge, coming back to the topic, right, OCL, our challenge is to do some governance over this. So we have to catalog all the code systems used nationwide and the international code systems, and come up with the value sets, the collections, right, and establish the mappings using concept maps. And we're doing everything using OCL, and we love the tool. I want to just take the time and thank you guys for the amazing job that you're doing, and that's all I gotta say. I mean, for 2 minutes pitch talk, I wasn't really prepared for this, but I hope you understood what I was trying to say.
If any of you would like, we are translating several value sets that are from the IPS standard to Portuguese and vice versa. So if any one of you will be interested in having some of them, just get in touch. I'll write my email here, and we can share that with you. Yes, Andrew.
Yeah, Beatrice, I wanted to just sort of raise the question that we were talking about on the PMs, which was that I think this is a really interesting use case, which was going to become quite standard in that people's content is quite specific locally, and yet we need maps to a more generic, higher level, broader concept in the international standard for the IPS. And yet it would be a shame if everyone just did their maps at the high level, if there were more granular maps available lower for whatever other use cases besides IPS. Well, we have lost a lot of work if people just simply attach broader maps to IPS. And so what we realize is that, you know, obviously SNOMED has a much larger content, which may map actually closer to your source terminology than IPS. And so you could potentially map to SNOMED CT first, then use the SNOMED to find the hierarchy to find which are the publicly available IPS codes. But also the CL content, the CIEL content, is an example of where there's an international quasi-standard of more granular clinical interface terms, which are mapped to SNOMED CT, often multiple. So there may be either a post-coordination issue, so CL is a pre-coordinated concept, or it may be simply a primitive that's not available in SNOMED and is mapped narrower than to SNOMED. But either way, having those maps would allow people who do have SNOMED or do have CL to interact at the more granular level, although it's not your exact use case. So your use case is obviously to support IPS. However, if we're using OCL as a way to do that, having the more granular maps would be, I think, useful, since so many other people are using OCL. So just a thought, as you do it, having the more granular maps might be better.
Yes, and I have just checked, you sent me the link, and I have just checked that you have the antivenoms that we need on CL. that are not on SNOMED. So this is pretty amazing. So yeah, it's a pity IPS does not use them. But anyway, I agree with you. If we can have the lower level mapping, that would be better. Thank you so much. Why not do the mapping to CL as well?
Well, it's just so that maybe OCL should be thinking, and Paul, when we think about this in terms of the UI around maps, there are hierarchies to maps. And so at some level, you might be able to leverage OCL as a way to roll up automatically to more available, more generally available, broader concepts.
Yeah, great idea. I would like to make a question. So how many countries are using OCL as the national repository?
So that's a little bit hard to say because of course our software is available online. It's open source, so anybody is able to use it. Perhaps what a better question would be to asking is who is talking about national health data dictionaries, and oftentimes they either are already or are planning to use OCL for that. We talked a little bit about this in our National Health Data Dictionary report out in the OpenHIE Terminology Services community. Let me pull up that slide real quick. Okay, should be sharing that right now to help answer this. We found out from that unconference session that over 20 countries are talking about NHDDs and terminology as part of their national health infrastructure architecture. And I know in particular, we had, I want to say it was 7 or 8, maybe even 10 countries who were, if they had not already launched an OCL instance, like for example, Kenya's National Health Data Dictionary has been deployed as a software. There's still content work happening. But in addition to that, there were 7 or 8 countries who are exploring using OCL for this purpose. So on a more official level, we've got quite a few countries in here that are talking about, and I should say this is terminology service in general, not necessarily limited to OCL, although many of these are OCL. Multiple countries that are deployed in a limited scope, or at least are in the planning, design, and development phases. And it seems like this number is only getting larger. We continually get requests from various people who are saying, hey, we want to start up this terminology service. Where do we start with that? And so as I kind of mentioned before, one thing we're trying to do is put out guidance and provide support for people who want to take on something as massive as a national health data dictionary. So this is an ongoing discussion that will happen. I would recommend join us for the OpenHIE Terminology Services subcommunity calls to keep this discussion going if you would like.
Yes, sure. We will certainly join because I would love to see Brazil names there because we are really doing that. This started this year, so it's very new, but for sure we are going to continue to use OCL as a national repository. So wonderful.
So Joe, you might also mention that because originally we had envisioned that OCL Online would be the source and that people would be leveraging it as the place where the terminology work was done, although they might be using local APIs for their service. More and more we've been hearing things like Brazil, where people have stood up their own sort of their own servers. And so it raised a question about how does the source for terminologies get sort of subscribed or published from OCL Online to the this more federated kind of network. And so there are now quite a bit of effort to think about how could we keep some of the key value of having a global server where people were sharing content with local implementations of OCL, and how do we sort of sync up content between the generic server and the country servers.
Right. Yeah, very much understood. And there's a lot of discussion and a lot of nuances that are going on with this. Like we are starting to put out some guidance as to, when you are deploying a terminology service, when it makes sense to go local versus using OCL online, the cloud. But this content syndication work is something that is very much on our radar in terms of, because people are publishing their content in multiple places, whether that be in FHIR terminology servers, whether that be in their own local OCL instance, or whether they're using OCL online. And there's benefits and trade-offs to each one. So we're trying to make sure that people can do the right solution when they get started. So this is also an ongoing discussion and would be good to keep it going. So. All right, and I noticed that we are at time 9 o'clock. I thank everybody so much for coming. Italo, do you? I see your hand raised. Do you want to chime in?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that talking about syndication, that we've been working quite a lot, right, Professor Beatrice? We've been loading code systems for complicated stuff like allergies, and also we have the challenge to load code systems for basic stuff like administrative gender and so on. So it's right on that topic. I mean, the syndication basically starting from just FHIR and all the native FHIR code systems and more sophisticated code systems. Just that thing, it's a lot of work. We have like 8 people working just with the management of these all of these code systems in our instance of OCL.
All right. Yeah, that is really great to hear. And you're exactly right. There's a lot of work that goes into this. And I think it's up to us to make sure that the software is doing its due diligence and being a good supporter in this. And also that we can guide others who are getting started in this endeavor, because this is not intuitive. You don't just start off knowing how much work goes into this. So very good. We will definitely keep engaged with this conversation because there's so much more to talk about. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today on OCL Showcase, and we will see you in the future.
Thanks
guys.
everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Guy. It was so nice to see all of you. Thank you for the great work you've been doing. We've been climbing on your shoulders, and we've been able to do a good work because of you. Thank you so much.
Bom dia.
Bom dia.
Bye-bye. Thanks.